An ancient power of the court is to protect people against detention without lawful authority.
A court rules that hundreds of refugees be allowed to land in Australia. Israeli tanks surround a Palestinian town, and President Robert Mugabe faces criticism from regional heads of state over Zimbabwe's land reform conflict. Hello and welcome to World News. I'm Anand Naidu at CNN Centre. Australia's government says it plans to appeal a federal court ruling on more than 400 asylum seekers. The group of refugees is on an Australian naval vessel en route to Papua New Guinea. Authorities turned them away 2 weeks ago, but now a federal court judge overruled that move and said the refugees should be allowed to land in Australia.
I am disappointed, obviously, with the outcome, and the decision is one which the government believes ought to be appealed and will be appealed. I can't discuss, without leaving myself open to contempt, I suppose, the detailed reasons. But let me just simply say we disagree very strongly. We believe that the decisions that we've taken all through this, on advice from senior Commonwealth officers, have been lawful. But we did take the view that for more abundant caution, legislation should have confirmed these arrangements. And obviously if the Labor Party had acceded to that suggestion, these matters would now be academic.
The orders of the court will require that the respondents release the rescuees onto the mainland of Australia. Given the practical issues that arise in releasing the rescuees and bringing them to Australia, and the agreement reached by the parties, I have allowed a short delay so that the release must be completed by 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Friday the 14th of September 2001, or at the determination of any appeal from my decision to the full court of the Federal Court of Australia, whichever is the later.
3 groups of asylum seekers have been turned away by Australia in the past 2 weeks. Canberra has identified another boat that it says carries asylum seekers. The vessel from Indonesia had entered Australia's territorial waters when it ran aground off the island of Ashmore Reef. Australia's Navy is trying to help the boat back into international waters. Israeli tanks have sealed off the West Bank town of Jenin, and Israel says 2 of its border policemen were killed by Palestinian gunmen. The latest violence comes as officials try to arrange a top-level meeting. Gerald Kessel joins us now with the latest developments. Gerald?
And an increasing scepticism about that high-level meeting that has been agreed upon in principle between the two sides, between Israel's Foreign Minister Shimon Peres and Palestinian Authority President Yasser Arafat, and indeed the focus on the Israeli action around the northern West Bank town of Jenin. Israeli tanks and troops have taken up positions on the fringes just inside areas controlled that are under the Palestinian Authority's control, but they haven't actually gone into the town of Jenin, but there are some 20 tanks or thereabouts around the town on the fringes. This encirclement, Israel says, was undertaken because Jenin, they call it a hornet's nest and a nest of terrorists, because the Israelis are saying that it's from Jenin that there have been a number of attacks within Israel have emanated, including a suicide bombing on Sunday carried out by an Israeli Arab citizen who liaised and got his instructions and bombed, the Israelis say, from within his handlers inside the town of Jenin. So the Israelis have taken up those positions and have remained there from before midnight last night, and that perhaps spells a new direction in the kind of pressure that Israel is applying on the Palestinian Authority to counter the Palestinian Intifada. There were exchanges of fire. 3 Palestinians reported seriously hurt as Palestinian gunmen fired on the Israeli tanks. The Israeli tanks fired back, so says the Israeli army, and also used some tank shells. There was also firing firing in the West Bank town of Hebron, exchanges of fire there, and 3 Palestinians wounded there too in serious condition, the Palestinian Red Crescent reports, and Israel reporting 2 of its soldiers, paramilitary personnel, border policemen killed by Palestinian gunmen who fired across from inside the West Bank, evidently into with a post within Israel. The men were on reportedly on sentry duty at that border police post inside Israel on the border between Israel and the West Bank. 2 killed and 1 wounded on the Israeli side, and all this latest violence indeed adding to the skepticism about the possibility of those truce talks which have been scheduled to get underway now for some time after the 2 sides have agreed in principle under the auspices of the Western European nations to meet. But so far that meeting not yet scheduled firmly, and no venue for it yet. Anand?
All right, thank you. Gerald Kessel there in Jerusalem. Efforts to breathe new life into the Northern Ireland peace process are underway. US Special Envoy to the region, Richard Haas, is planning to meet separately with leaders of rival political parties in the province. Meanwhile, there's continued tension in Belfast. Around 100 Protestants mounted a silent protest as Roman Catholic parents attempted to cross a Protestant area to take their children to school. In Afghanistan, the Taliban are reported to have launched an offensive on an opposition stronghold. The attack on 2 fronts of the Panjshir Valley coincides with conflicting reports on the fate of the opposition's commander. Reports say Ahmed Shah Massoud was the target of an apparent assassination attempt on Sunday. Some US sources say the attack killed him, but Massoud's alliance denies the reports. Nick Robertson reports.
Seen here 2 years ago, showing CNN fortifications at the entrance to the Panjshir Valley, where he built a reputation as a formidable military leader, undefeated during the 10-year Soviet occupation of Afghanistan in the 1980s. His penchant for publicity may have been his downfall. His would-be assassins reportedly posed as a TV crew before detonating a suicide bomb that wounded him. In Kabul, news of his fate has been keenly followed. Many remember his days in government in the early 1990s, when fighting between Mujahideen factions destroyed much of this city. Since being driven out of Kabul by the Taliban 5 years ago, Massoud has been critical in holding together the so-called Northern Alliance. Those remaining fighters representing what's left of the government the United Nations still recognise as legitimate. He was skilled not only on the battlefield but in politics, keeping quarrelsome commanders true to the cause. His success in holding back the advancing Taliban army made him Taliban enemy #1. An ethnic Tajik, Massoud was always favoured in the north, where his alliance held 5% of the country, high in the Himalayan foothills, close to the border with Tajikistan. Taliban and Pakistan military sources indicate the Taliban have been readying for a large offensive in recent weeks. Massoud's injuries could well provide them the opportunity for attack they've been waiting for. Taliban officials insist they were not involved in the attack on Massoud. They condemn terrorist acts. If they had been responsible, they say, they would have announced it proudly. If Ahmed Shah Massoud's injuries prove serious enough to keep him from commanding the Northern Alliance, the likelihood of lasting military cohesion capable of keeping the Taliban at bay is greatly diminished. Should the Taliban conquer the rest of the country, they will likely begin pushing harder for United Nations and international recognition as Afghanistan's rightful rulers. Nick Robertson, CNN, Kabul, Afghanistan.
The United Nations says it may send more peacekeepers to Sierra Leone despite progress towards peace. In his report to the Security Council, Secretary General Kofi Annan said that more than 16,000 rebels and militia members have been disarmed since May 2001. But the report also says that the UN contingent of about 16,000 troops in Sierra Leone might need to be reinforced early next year to help lay the groundwork for elections in May. Officials from across southern Africa say they're set to resume talks aimed at resolving Zimbabwe's land conflict. They're in Harare, conferring with representatives from a variety of interest groups, including white farmers and militants loyal to President Robert Mugabe. Jeff Koinanga reports.
The colourful welcome of the heads of state masked the mood in the conference centre as the region's leaders came out with their strongest reaction yet to the Zimbabwe land crisis, laying the blame directly at Robert Mugabe's feet.
To me, the problem lies in the way the government of Zimbabwe is trying to implement the land reform process and the principle of the equitable land distribution. That is the heart of the matter. That is the cause of the present crisis. That is the problem we must resolve.
Malawian President Muluzi, chair of the regional trade group, also had a warning if Zimbabwe's current crisis were allowed to degenerate any further.
Of great concern to all of us is that if the land issue is not urgently resolved amicably and peacefully, the economic and political problems Zimbabwe is facing now could easily snowball across the entire Southern African region.
The summit follows months when leaders in the region were afraid to openly confront the Mugabe government's failure to confront the illegal occupation of white-owned farms. But now the region is feeling the ripple effect of the Zimbabwean economy in freefall. But even as the heads of state were preparing to hear from the various stakeholders involved in the land crisis, some human rights groups, which were conspicuously excluded from the talks, say the farm takeovers are more about intimidating the opposition than taking land.
Well, we presume part of the reason is that we're going to give a message that the Zimbabwean government would not wish to hear. We've been making a noise, I think, since February last year, that serious human rights violations have been taking place. We believe this is part of the reason why the international community has taken this matter so seriously. It's really the issue of human rights and not land that is at the core of this problem.
And though some of the region's leaders were taking a swipe at Mugabe, Ian Smith, the last Prime Minister of Rhodesia before it became independent Zimbabwe, and one of Mugabe's staunchest critics, urged calm and patience.
So it does seem as though the noose is tightening. And I repeat, I think at this stage we've got to keep cool heads, try to see that we don't aggravate the situation, that we don't do anything wrong, and just wait for the thing to come to a conclusion.
Officials in the Zimbabwean government say they are ready to accept the proposal that they start enforcing the rule of law and stop the farm invasions, a process they say is already underway. Reports of farm violence continue to cloud the summit, even as the host nation insists the situation is under control. And to prove it, tomorrow they plan a series of tours around the farms, specifically for the visiting heads of state. Jeff Koinanga, CNN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
In Norway, preliminary results of Monday's parliamentary elections indicate diminishing support for the ruling Labour Party. With nearly all the votes counted, projections give Labour 43 seats in the 165-member parliament. Although the Conservatives received only 38 seats, they're trying to form a ruling coalition. But Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg says he intends to stay in office.
We are a party which has shown for many years that we are able to take care of the economy and also to build out and to improve the Norwegian welfare state. And we would like to continue with that in the years to come.
We really have a chance of changing government on Tuesday, but I'm not really able to predict the outcome. It's so close.
The final official results are expected on Wednesday. Ahead on World News, Typhoon Danas batters Japan even as the storm loses strength. We'll have the global forecast coming up.
Introducing new Kellogg's Special K Red Berry cereal. Crunchy sweet flakes, now with slices of real strawberries, right in the box. Looking good, never tasted so great. Kellogg's Special K Red Berries. It's new.
Now's the best time to join America Online.
If I knew it was this easy, I would have started a long time ago.
Because now you can try AOL and get our best offer ever. 1,000 hours of AOL free for 45 days. Plug it in and you go. You don't need a credit card to join AOL. Call 1-877-265-0100 and be online in minutes.
America Online is the easy one.
Our free 24-hour customer service representatives are always available by phone.
Customer service is always there to help.
1,000 hours for 45 days free. Call 1-877-265-0100 to get everything AOL offers.
You've got mail.
I've got mail. I love when an instant message pops up.
AOL has parental controls.
And that's a good thing.
Chat, instant messages, email.
AOL has it all. Now you can join AOL right over the phone. You don't even need a credit card.
Fire up the computer and off you go.
Get online in minutes. Our operators are standing by.
If we could do it, anyone can.
America Online, so easy to use, no wonder it's #1. Call 1-877-265-0100 for AOL's best offer ever.
Burden of Proof, weekdays, 12:30 Eastern on CNN.
Seven men from Bosnia-Herzegovina are on trial at the UN tribunal in The Hague. Two Bosnian Croat suspects are accused of leading a mass killing campaign against Muslims in Mostar in 1993 and 1994. An international prosecutor described the alleged actions of one of them.
He commanded the Croatian Defense Council forces' attack on the villages of Sovici and Doljani in central Herzegovina. He presided over the expulsion of Bosnian Muslim civilians from their homes and from their villages. He presided over the burning of their homes and the destruction of their mosques.
5 Bosnian Serbs also face prosecution for alleged mass murders of Muslims in eastern Bosnia between 1992 and 1994. In Japan, a member of the U.S. Air Force told the first hearing of his trial on rape charges that he's innocent. Prosecutors say the airman grabbed a Japanese woman and forced her to have sex. The defendant maintains she consented. The case has stirred resentment against U.S. forces in Okinawa. Some Japanese were also upset at the delay in the serviceman's handover to police in July. Offshore and onshore, 2 major storms in Asia are keeping people guessing. Here's Lila Feng with the global weather.
As we work our way through September, expecting that much of the seasonal rains continue to ease through the Indian subcontinent, even southeastern Asia, some lingering effects expected through India's northeast. We have also our typhoon that has lost considerable amounts of strength, still maintaining tropical storm strength winds around some 95 kilometers per hour. Danas expected to keep the rains as the primary concern, whether it's through Honshu across Hokkaido and veering off quickly enough that Thursday does bring about much improvement for much of Japan. Typhoon Nari, less of a concern as it remains fairly stationary. Very little movement experienced over the past 24 hours. However, still at minimal tropical, or rather typhoon strength, 120 kilometer per hour sustained winds. However, again, not affecting any areas of southern Japan, including Okinawa or even Taiwan. There is a look at also how temperatures managed to hover around fairly average values for most of the major centers and through Australasia towards the southeast and again towards the southwest. Fairly fast passage of showery conditions and overall improvement around the eastern Great Bight as we get into the extended forecast. New Zealand with very little activity, although temperatures getting a bit of a boost into the mid-teens. And through Europe, high pressure controlling much of the Mediterranean, relatively calm conditions for the south. However, windy weather accompanies both our low pressure centers traveling through southern Scandinavia, back through the Low Countries and towards the Balkans. Combination of both these systems become more evident in the extended detail, and here's where we also introduce the next system, Northern British Isles, with temperatures overall bit of a cool down in behind all these cold fronts passing through. You can even see that cooler pocket of air with temperatures only mid to lower teens.
U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell is on his first official visit to South America. He arrived in Lima Monday for a special session of the Organization of American States. He will then move on to Colombia, where he's scheduled to meet President Andrés Pastrana. Leading up to Powell's visit, Washington announced that it will impose sanctions on a paramilitary group in Colombia. Washington classified the group a terrorist organization. The new designation makes any financial support for the group illegal. The State Department said that the decision was made after a review of the group's activities.
Like many terrorist organizations, the AUC has a lot of rhetoric which has suggested that they are trying to protect citizens from other terrorist groups, when in fact, and as our review has shown and this designation indicates, they have not done that. They've carried out their own massacres, they've displaced citizens, they've kidnapped, they've extorted, engaged in the very practices that they have tried to condemn, and also worked so closely with narco-traffickers as well.
Now to the White House. Australia's Prime Minister John Howard has wrapped up a visit to Washington, where he met with United States President George W. Bush. Aides say Mr. Howard was hoping for a broader commitment on trade issues, but they say he left disappointed. The Bush administration told Mr. Howard that the U.S. could not start trade negotiations with Australia immediately because of other pressing issues.
We understand that for domestic political reasons related to the negotiation between the administration and the Congress in order to secure Trade Promotion Authority, it was not possible to make an in-principle commitment to the negotiation of that agreement during my visit. But I have no doubt that we will return to the issue.
The two leaders did agree that top trade officials would meet by the end of the year. Now let's take a look at world financial markets. For that we go to Becky Anderson in London. Hi, Becky.
Anand, thank you very much indeed. European bourses clawing back some ground this Tuesday after their Wall Street counterparts reversed early losses to end a little higher on Monday, or in the case of the Dow Jones, unchanged to the numbers, and near 5% gains for British Telecom, helping to lift London's FT 100, and that's up 1.25%. Frankfurt, the DAX is 2% high. Europe's biggest software maker, SAP, up 3.5% in that market. To Paris, where the CAC 40 is up 1.5%, and in Zurich, the SMI is also 1.5% higher. Some Asian markets, including Tokyo, also putting in a stronger performance this Tuesday. Tokyo's Nikkei adding nearly 1%. Japan's struggling Asahi Bank and its proposed merger partner Daiwa Bank both ended sharply higher. Asahi's forecasting record first half profits and adding it was seeking an early agreement on the Daiwa merger. And in other Asian market news, Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained just 0.1% and Singapore's Straits Times up 0.5%. To company news now, and Italy's Unicredito Italiano is ending talks to take over Germany's Commerzbank. Italy's second largest bank is no longer looking to create a pan-European retail banking giant with Germany's fourth largest bank, both companies citing differences over valuations after falls in their share prices. Commerzbank has been seen as a takeover target since its merger talks with Dresdner Bank collapsed last year. Unicredito is up 6%, Commerzbank, though, down slightly in Frankfurt. And US computer maker Gateway is eliminating its entire workforce in Ireland and in Britain. That's as part of a broader pullback from Asia and Europe. Gateway says it has concluded mandatory severance negotiations with 900 people in Ireland and with an additional 185 workers in the UK. Gateway said in August it would probably pull out of Asia and Europe as it faces weak conditions and severe competition in the PC market. And the world's most profitable car maker, Porsche, reporting a 12% jump in annual sales. That's despite the global slowdown. Porsche making a pre-tax profit of nearly $400 million. And the company says it expects sales to remain high for the year 2002. And that is the very latest in business news. I'm Becky Anderson in London. Now back to Anand in Atlanta. Anand.
Thanks, Becky. Doctors are trying to combat a disease afflicting the elderly. Alzheimer's attacks memory and speech, eventually rendering a person helpless. Rhonda Rowlands examines efforts to determine who may be at the greatest risk of getting the disease.
Yvonne Muller and dozens of other young, healthy volunteers have agreed to undergo brain scans every year for the rest of their lives to help scientists determine when Alzheimer's begins to set in.
This study is designed to look at the earliest features in the brain that predict some of the earliest changes in behavior that are consistent with an Alzheimer's disease path.
But already, Dr. Moni DeLeon says his team has found an important clue by using the PET scan, a clue that could make it possible to predict whether a healthy elderly person is going to develop a precursor to Alzheimer's, known as mild cognitive impairment.
This study is the first study ever to show that there are changes in the brain in normal people that will predict a worsening of their memory performance.
The change, a dwindling of glucose metabolism in a small part of the brain known to be a memory center. Glucose is fuel to the brain, fuel to our thoughts.
Results show that we can make predictions among normal people as to who is going to develop memory impairment. It does not tell us at this point whether those memory impairments are caused by Alzheimer's.
Researchers say this latest finding is another step towards an early diagnostic tool. They already know a part of the brain called the hippocampus shrinks in Alzheimer's patients.
Here are the areas of the brain that are often affected by Alzheimer's early on.
Last year, UCLA researchers found that in patients with a known genetic risk for Alzheimer's, the PET scan could pick up brain changes before Alzheimer's symptoms appeared.
What we found that was very striking was that in the people who had the genetic risk for Alzheimer's disease, they all had a significant decline in areas of the brain that ultimately are affected by Alzheimer's disease.
By finding the disease early, before discernible memory loss sets in, researchers predict they'll be able to stop the disease in its tracks with effective drugs or perhaps even a vaccine. But so far, they have neither in hand. Rhonda Rowland, CNN, Atlanta.
Cap off the headlines. Australia's government says it plans to appeal a federal court ruling on more than 400 asylum seekers. The group of refugees is on a naval vessel en route to Papua New Guinea, and for the time being, the government says it will hold its course. The court ruled that the refugees should be allowed to land in Australia. Israeli tanks have surrounded the West Bank town of Jenin, saying it's a, quote, hornet's nest for Palestinian suicide bombers. And an attack on Israeli border policemen killed 2 along the northern Israeli West Bank border. In the shadow of fresh violence, officials say they're growing doubtful that they can arrange a proposed top-level meeting to discuss a ceasefire. A member of the U.S. Air Force is denying a rape charge brought against him by a court in Japan. Prosecutors accused the serviceman of raping a Japanese woman in June. The defendant says they had sex but maintains she consented. Observers say the case is stirring resentment against U.S. forces on Okinawa. And finally, in sports, Michael Jordan said Monday that he may return to play in the National Basketball Association. A news conference at which Jordan is to announce a decision is scheduled for next week. Asked by journalists whether he's definitely coming back, Jordan said, quote, "I'm doing it for the love of the game." This would be the second comeback for the 38-year-old basketball star, if he indeed does come back. That is World News. I'm Anand Naidu at CNN Centre. Stay with CNN throughout your day for the latest news, sports and weather.
Larry King Live, weeknights 9 Eastern on CNN. Greenfield at Large.
Already the smartest, most literate discussion series on TV.
Finally, a program that combines intriguing guests, challenging topics, and intelligent talk.
Intelligence at work.
Jeff Greenfield tosses out the topic and everyone rolls with the punches.
This is highly promising stuff.
It's the show that's bringing back the art of conversation.
Good stuff, Greenfield.
Greenfield at Large, weeknights 10:30 Eastern, only on CNN.
Get to the point with Greta Van Susteren.
Forget the numbers.
Greta takes on the tough issues.
What are you Republicans going to do?
And says what has to be said. Greta gets to the point. Weeknights, 8:30 Eastern on CNN.
Speak Out on television's daily interactive town meeting. Join Bobby Batista for Talk Back Live. Today, 3 Eastern on CNN.
Pine Mountain, Georgia offers everything you want to do and see in Georgia. Pine Mountain, the gateway to Callaway Gardens. Pine Mountain is packed with fun and thrills all year long. Enjoy outdoor activity or find values in our unique shops. enjoy our delightful restaurants, and stay in our comfortable and hospitable hotels and inns. For a free book on things to see and do and places to stay in Pine Mountain, call this toll-free number now.